on Riverside, and we were
Oh, Juliet, we've lost you.
on
That's the thing I remember about Riverside. You have to have really good internet.
Riverside for
We've lost you, Jay. I'm going to message her. Okay. Maybe we should start, Jen.
Okay.
We'll see if Juliet comes back. Yeah, let's start. So, welcome everyone to Shoes of Love. Yep. And we've lost Juliet, unfortunately, because I think her internet's patchy. So anyway, we'll start without her and see if she comes back in. And Jen, welcome to the show today. Our topic is to be of the world, not to be in the world, not of it. And the subheading to that is protecting ourselves and our children in this world where we can get so, here she is, we can get so caught up, and I think sometimes we can get really buried in the fear, and because we hear so much stuff going on, and and I know I've been guilty of that, of getting consumed by what's going on in the world and how it's going to affect me and how it's going to affect my children, and trying to remember and keep in my heart that yes, I'm part of this world, I'm living in it, but there's more to the story than meets the naked eye, and to have trust and knowing in myself that I am in control to a certain extent. And I mean, of course, we don't have complete control of anything, but I get to choose. I have choice.
Yes.
So, Jen, I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, so you're getting into now this idea of personal authority, right? Which we enact through our element of choice, because that's what we get to do when we come here to this realm. We get to enact our personal authority by choosing for ourselves, choosing what we define as okay, choosing what we define as not okay. So I think, it's really impossible to have this discussion this evening without encompassing boundaries, because it's by figuring out where our boundaries lie that we're then able to allow others to understand what it is that we need and what's within our comfort, as well as what isn't. But it's also a way that as mothers, I think we're able to also insulate our children by both creating boundaries that extend that periphery around them, as well as the modeling of what it means to have solid boundaries. So for instance, there was a time recently I was dropping my 13-year-old off to his son's house. Actually, no, I was picking him up. And I went into the other family's home space, and I was met with this, I don't know, this element of resistance. And there were comments made about, oh, it must be so nice to have that background in yoga because you understand what it means to, really focus on your self-care. And I wish that I could do that, but I can't do that because I have all of these things going on, right? And we get into the car, and Devin looks over at me and he's like, what was that about? like she realizes like she does in fact have a choice, right, Mom? Like she can just say no to some of these many commitments, and then she too could have some time that she's saying that she needs to relax and focus on herself. But like even he kind of picked up on the fact that there was something underneath that issuance that was questioning my way of being and orienting to the world and expecting that I, in that moment, find a way to defend that. And I wasn't going to engage with that. And that's not something I'm ever going to.
Yes, good on you. Yeah, good on you. Yes, I completely, like, I've just had similar thing happen in the group, in She's of Love, where I put a post up about wanting to be remembered in this world and by my children as someone who enjoyed her life, someone who, you know, sucked the marrow out of life and wasn't just stressed all the time. And oh my goodness, women came out of the woodwork for that post and were defending their choices to be busy and to be last on the list. Yes. And they had put themselves last on the list, right? They were convinced that being last on the list was your job as a mother. And there was, and I know because I've done it myself, I've been that woman who, when I had children, I was last on the list, and I believed wholeheartedly that that was what I had to do, that I had to have children, that their needs came before my own. And to a certain extent, when they're small, yes, I understand that, because they need to be fed, they need to have their nappies changed, they need all of this stuff. But there comes a point in life when your children can take over the care of themselves and I might add, in my opinion, should take over the care of themselves and become responsible for their own being in this world. Because if we don't allow them to do that with our guidance and with our happy, you know, yes, take control, be your own person, you know, like our encouragement, how are they ever going to learn how to be individuals in the world and be happy individuals, if you know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, they need to have that autonomy. They need to know that they have us backing them.
Yes.
To be able to do what Juliet's doing and go off into the world and travel and explore themselves and, you know, make mistakes and be big.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a lot embedded there, and I'm hearing very distinctively that you have provided your children with a strong, secure base of attachment, right? First and foremost, when they were small.
Well, I hope so.
So we don't talk about those years 0 to 4 as being formative for no reason. They really are the formative years for our neurological pathways, our beliefs about self. That's when core shame really is instigated, is during that early developmental stage around 2 and 3, the autonomy versus shame and self-doubt. Like this is like that Ericksonian perspective, right? And so if we don't teach our kids like, hey, you can have a choice. Hey, you're resilient. Like, I can't tell you how many families, when every time the baby stumbled and fell, it was swooping in and, oh my God, are you okay? And we were like, we would kind of look at each other and we'd look at him and we'd be like, you're okay, buddy. You're okay. And like, he'd get up and he'd, you know, brush himself off and he'd toddle on, and there was no like significant dysregulation or lapse in whatever it was he was orienting to. He would look to us like, am I okay? And we would say it, we would say to him, yes, you are okay, we're okay. And then there he go, right? And we also taught him to make choices, much to the chagrin of, well, at least my family system of origin. They could not believe how much my ex-husband and I would allow the baby to make choices. I mean, he would be barely
Yep.
verbal. I mean, we taught him the baby sign so he could communicate even before he had a lot of language. And we were very attuned
Mm-hmm.
with him with his signals that weren't part of the baby sign, because he had other things that he would do, like a hand placed here meant I'm enjoying our connection right now. I want to be with you. You're giving me good input. And we both knew that to be true about him. And so even if you're like trying to stir the brownie batter and he's putting his little tiny 2-year-old hand there, it might be a little bit of an impediment for stirring that brownie batter, but you're going to know I'd rather have that hand there, because that hand there means he feels good and connected to me right now, right? And so we became very attuned to his language and his way of being, his way of orienting, and we empowered him with those little choices. And we're not dumb. We know what we're doing. When you're working with a 2 and 3-year-old child, you give them choices that all the choices are acceptable, right? But it still instills in
Yes.
him that idea of I can do it, and I can choose, and I can be okay with those outcomes. And we would help him work through if he made a choice and then realized he wanted a different choice, or
Yep.
something, but teaching that process through the modeling. And I think that's where the boundaries come in. And it's interesting because you mentioned the trust, being able to hold the
Yes.
faith and to have the trust. But what I'm hearing is you've really gone inward to discern for yourself, like, what is needed for me to kind of undo, well, not undo, but maybe disengage some of that conditioning, that programming, that input that creates these maladaptive patterns and belief systems that we come into.
Yep. And I think it's so important too when we have children, to see them as a person. So, raising Juliet, for example, I saw her growing. I saw the person that she was becoming. I took my cues from her as a person. So when she had an interest in something, or if she wanted to express herself in a certain way, which, by the way, in my opinion, is so important, is to be able to express yourself and who you are and the way you want to live in this world, the way you want to be in this world. It's so important to allow our children to be creative in that area and to express themselves however they see fit, as long as it's safe, of course. And her way of doing that was through the way she dressed, her clothes. And so she saw things in this world that she resonated with, and then she started to dress that way. And to me, it was crazy, because she would have crazy colors on, and she was like really out there, and it was confronting to me. But I was like, this is the way she wants to express her inner being, and that's coming out into the world. And so I wanted to celebrate that, and and allow her to explore that about herself. Because when our children are small, these things, if we can cultivate these parts of their personality, those grow up with them. That inner child playing in the world will grow up with them and become parts of who they are. They might design clothes, they might design glasses, they might end up being somebody who is in the fashion world. Like these little sparks of joy that they show when they're children. For some it's music, for some it's playing, they might play doctor and then they'll grow up and be a doctor, stuff like that. There's gold in all of that stuff. They might grow up and not want to do any of that stuff.
Yes.
But it may lead them to knowing themselves in a way that they get to decide. They will know for themselves. If we as parents don't take notice of that stuff and we just, push it aside, or we're like, oh, that's nonsense, because I know that happened to me. With and I'm not saying that they did it on purpose, they didn't know any better.
Right.
But those parts of myself were overlooked and were dismissed.
Yes.
And I didn't want to do that to my children. I wanted them to have their gifts and to be happy about it and to play with it and to grow up knowing that as their parents, we supported that in them. And I think that's so important, because the one thing that I learned about children, I always thought, before I had kids, I thought they were a blank slate, and that when they came out, that is when all the stuff was imprinted on them, and that's when they started to learn and grow. But actually what I found out is they come out with stuff already recorded on them. They already have stuff inside. They have things that are naturally part of them already, and it comes out when they're very young.
Yes.
So
I'm so excited to hear you talk right now. I'm sorry, I keep smiling so big because everything you're saying is so deeply resonant.
Yeah. And I see you, Jen, online, like posting about your son and his music and being on stage, because I'm married to a musician. So, you know, I love that you celebrate that about him. And he's 13, isn't he?
Yep.
Is your son 13? Yeah.
13, yeah.
So, you know, like for him to be experiencing that stuff now at this age with your support and gusto behind him, I'm sure he feels like Superman, like he can do anything because he has you supporting him doing it.
Well, and it's so interesting that you just mentioned Superman, because like Juliet, when he was tiny, that was his first foray into expressing himself, was through his way that he would dress.
Right.
And same thing, because my sisters, you know, they would send the little Gymboree outfits for the hand-me-downs, and they were all matched and cute and like little embroidered cutout things that were stitched on in 3D and just so cute, right? And he would just want to create these looks for himself, and he would blend and mix things, and then we would allow him to cycle through his interests, right? So like his first famous superhero was Captain America, and then it was Hulk, and then it was the Flash, and then, you know, Batman, and he just kept cycling through, and whatever it was he wanted to vibe with, we just vibed with him and we followed his lead. And much like what you described with Juliet, I see in Devin as what that renders is not only somebody who's more self-expressive, but who's less inhibited, right? Where we have like a reduction of inhibition, but without some sort of substance hooking into the reward center of the brain, right? We have a natural progression of high vibratory state, nervous system regulation, and expansive outward energy that's directed indeed from that solar plexus, the I am life path soul essence core center. Hi, love.
Yep.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. So and then
you talking about him.
Yeah, well, he wants to go for a walk. The other thing is in regard to that self-expression and the ability to know themselves. When we talk about like being uninhibited, sometimes people perceive that as a negative. I receive that as a very positive thing, because it's the opposite of repression, right? And here's the thing about repression. What you said about some of those parts of yourself, those beautiful, vibrant, engaging parts of you were maybe overlooked or dismissed, and not to anybody's, you know, fault, but just that was the way of being, and there was a different paradigm. You know, I look at it as kind of like old paradigm authoritarian parenting versus new paradigm conscious parenting. And the whole entire conscious parenting construct is actually founded upon the premise that indeed they are not an extension of ourselves. They are their own unique little individual that comes in, like you said, with their own knowledge, with their own disposition, their own temperament. Now, this is where misattunement comes in, and we have attachment wounding, because we can have a family system with very good parents who are very supportive and make all the right decisions and all the right calls, and they can have multiple children, and for all of those children but one, all of that can be working and hitting on the cylinders. And if there's a misattunement with how that child is wired to orient to the world around them, they're going to be hitting walls right and left with that kid.
Yep. So true. So true. And I think that's part of the lesson that we're here to learn. That's part of the experience that we're here. Not everything is going to go the way you plan it. You can be like, that's the perfect example of how you can have the best intentions and you can put forward your best foot every single time, and things will still go the way they need to go in order to grow us and to give us lessons. And that might feel like shit and it might be really hard, but you know, it's necessary for us to be challenged. It's necessary for people, you know, in our lives to teach us. It's like families who have children that have a disability of some kind, like maybe Down syndrome or some kind of neurodivergence. And they say so many times, you listen to those parents talking about those children and they say, it's an angel sent to me. This child is an angel sent to me to teach me how to be a better person or how to be a better parent. And they feel so many times they feel such gratitude for having that child in their life, because without having that resistance, that what society would deem as a problem or a challenge, you know, without having that challenge in their lives, they wouldn't have grown. They wouldn't have seen things that they saw. And it's, you know, and I've had my own challenges. I lost a child in between Juliet and my son Bryn. I lost a baby in the middle there, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. And it was it grew me, I have so much more compassion now through that experience and the grief of that, and learning how to grieve and learning how grief is perceived in the world, you know, like, 'cause I'd lost grandparents and things like that before, but this was like something so close to my heart that it was so huge and so sad and so life-changing. And then realizing how somebody who is grieving walks in the world and gets treated by others. You know, I would never have seen that and never have really experienced it unless it had happened to me. And so, you know, just people saying certain things, they think that they're saying them with love in their heart, and they think that they're being supportive, but saying things like, you know, your son is in a better place now. Well, you know, that doesn't help me. I want my son with me. I had my son with the intention of raising him and having him in my life. And so, you know, just little things like that was an eye-opener, to say the least. And grew me.
They're not meeting you where you are, and they're not honoring how it is that you're feeling and what it is that you need. And that goes back to
because putting a positive spin, putting the positive spin on it, like the perception is that putting that positive spin on it is like giving me comfort, because he's passed away, but he's, you know, in heaven. So, and that's a good thing, like looking at it through the eyes of a positive spin. And that I can see that now. It's been, I lost him in 98. So, sorry, in 2008, sorry. So I see that now after all these years. I can talk about him without crying. I can see the positive in, you know, that stuff. But at the time when I was grieving, and this is the point, is the grief. The grief is so huge and the hurt is so deep that you feel sorry for yourself. You don't want your son to be dead. You don't want your family member to be dead. You don't want your mother to be dead, or whoever it is.
Feel that. You have to be able. That's how we heal the grief. I have a quote above my
It's to acknowledge it.
It says, your grief doesn't need your healing needs your grief. Like, we have to process. And when we're told these things, when that positive spin is put on it, what that is that's an inversion. Because what that does is it reinforces those nasty societal messages that we need to soldier up and carry on. No, the baby is dead. We need to grieve, is what we need.
Yeah.
And, you know,
and my dad, you go. Sorry,
I was just going to say, like, this is an area that women, I think we could all benefit from a deeper discussion on just that topic alone, of how to be with somebody who's grieving, and how to hold that space, and to allow them to have their process, whatever that process means for them, but to honor that and to say, I honor you, and therefore I honor your process of grief, and I will be with you through that, whatever that looks like for you, instead of them trying to make it go away because it makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. That's the key, isn't it? That's where I think I'm coming from with this. It's that feeling of, this is so uncomfortable for the other person. My grief is so uncomfortable for them, which then reflects back to me that I'm in a really bad place.
Right.
So seeing their uncomfortable, so it's not okay that I'm grieving. Like, that's the feeling that I had. It's not okay. My grief is happening, and it's something that's, you know, I'm in. It's like a cauldron bubbling under me, and I'm in it. And a person can't sit with that because it's so uncomfortable for them, and therefore I start to feel like my grief is too big and that I'm going to die from it. It was that feeling of, I'm never going to see the end of this. I'm so far in it. It's so big that it's going to consume me, and that person can't be in it with me, so I'm in it alone. You know, that was the underlying feeling of it. And my dad, actually, he was the one who taught me about grief, because when his mother died, I saw a side of my dad that I had never seen. And because he adored his mother, he had such a deep connection to his mum. When she passed, he got blind drunk, and he was crying, and he was like inconsolable. He was inconsolable. His brothers were scared. He has 2 brothers, and he's the eldest of 3 boys, and they were afraid because they'd never seen him like that. And so I was watching this as a young teenager, watching my dad's reaction to the death of his mum, and the family being there and watching him as well, and all the interactions that were happening, and I was like, wow, he's really in grief. And so when I felt that grief too, when I lost my child, I understood my father's grief. I understood the feeling of it and what made him so crazy.
As you speak,
and it was like, yeah, sorry, Jen, you go. I was finished
I was
anyway.
just going to say, as you speak about it, that old adage of he was beside himself really kind of came to me.
Yes.
Like that idea that he wasn't really in his body able to deal with that because
exactly.
He was really beside himself.
He was.
Yeah.
He and I think that scared him. I think that really scared him, that out-of-body experience, because that was why he was drinking.
Right.
Because he couldn't understand how to deal with what he was experiencing. Because I think sometimes, grief can be so shocking to the system. It can be shocking to your body. It can be like the depth of the feeling that's coming out of you when you know that you're never going to see that person again, you in your lifetime. That's it. That person is gone for your life. It's a permanent change. So that feeling in your body is so foreign, for starters, and so big. You do feel like you're going to be consumed by it. It feels like this is never going to pass. I'm in the storm, and the storm is going to kill me. Yeah. And I think that out-of-body experience that you have, because I've experienced that out-of-body thing as well, where I was actually beside myself, is a survival technique. That's a psychological survival technique that we experience so that we can cope with what's happening. And I think it was so traumatic for him that because my dad would drink, but he would never get drunk. I hardly ever saw my dad get drunk unless it was like some really, really emotional thing happening. And if he felt that he couldn't deal with it emotionally, that's how he would deal with it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what he did. Yeah. And both my uncles carried him up the stairs of my grandparents' house and put him to bed, and let him stay, and he cried himself to sleep in that state because of how he couldn't be around people. He was just too upset. So watching my uncles carry my father up the stairs to the bedroom was like, for me, it was like, wow, that's his brothers really coming together and being there for him. Yeah. And and as a young adult, a young child, that was very, it made an impression on me that it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter, because my father was very strong. He was extremely independent. My dad was a beautiful man and very, very huge presence in all our lives. And to see his brothers carrying him that way was like, in a way, it was so poignant too, because he needed that. He needed that support in that moment. Physically, he needed it.
Wow, it's like that footsteps poem, right? Where it's like sometimes you see it on the wall posted, and it's asking why God, why is there only one set? Oh God, I'm gonna cry. Of footprints, because that's when I was carrying you. Yeah, they were loving him through it, being with him, meeting him where he was, and knowing that by doing that he would emerge out the other side.
Yes, and he did.
Trust.
He did. But he was changed. He was a different person after the death of his mother. He was changed, but he was still, the essence of who he was still there, but he had a deeper understanding of life. after losing his mum. He had a much deeper understanding. And I felt the same way when I lost him, because I was very close to my father. So when he died, I understood the grief that losing a child and losing a parent feels very different. And I understood how that grief, knowing, because she was his rock, she was his anchor, they had a very special bond, and I had that special bond with him. And so I actually had to learn how to be in the world, how to live my life without my dad. I had to change as a person. I had to become because he was my go-to. If there was anything wrong, I would ring him and bounce my problem off him, and he would always have wise words for me, and that wasn't there anymore. And so if anything went wrong, I had to rely on myself to walk the path through whatever it was that I was going through, and try and draw on the strength that I learned from my dad.
Right. And there's that element of resilience again. So what we're doing by taking on this new parenting paradigm and really acting out of that belief that this child is not an extension of me, they're their own unique, sovereign individual. There's how they are cultivating their resilience, because they see us as we go through our hardships, and they see us coming out the other side, and they see us, those of us who have made that choice to really go deeply inward to find out where the wounding is, whether it's attachment wounding or other trauma, and how that's impacted our systems, like our bodily system, how that's impacted our beliefs, how that's impacted our communication patterns, how that's impacted our relationships with other people. They are picking up on all of the things that we are doing, and when we can show them it's okay to tend to yourself, it's okay to honor what it is that you need, what it is that you want, they're going to go into the world and again not just be more self-expressive, but they're going to be less repressed, and that means they're going to have less mental health difficulties. I mean, repression is really where depression comes from. It's from the suppression and the repression of these parts and parcels of ourselves, of the way that we really feel. And it's even the cumulative stress that comes from years and years of giving other people a yes when we really need that to be a no, or saying no when we really need it to be a yes. And we're denying our own impulses, and we're subjugating our own emotions and our own experience.
Yeah,
and that's
so true.
What creates that constriction. It's tight.
So what comes up for me when I hear you speak about that is the repression and the being in the world and having urges as a human that come out naturally. They're naturally there in your body, in your psyche, the connection between the two, all of that. When that gets repressed, when we're told that our human urges are wrong, that they are disgusting, that they are they go against religion, when we're told to put the things outside of ourselves before our own desires and our own and I'm not saying all urges need your attention, because of course in this conversation the knowledge that we do not harm others is paramount. We do not harm others and we do not harm ourselves. I'm talking about natural urges that we have to express ourselves and natural urges that we have to love the people that we love and things like that. When those things are when we're told those things are wrong and that we should repress them, that creates blockages in our energy and therefore blockages in our bodies.
Yes, dis-ease.
And dis-ease, exactly. And so, you know, we learn from a very young age that we need to hide parts of ourselves and put on a mask and be accepted and be acceptable to be accepted. And I think unblocking those things and allowing ourselves to have an expression of who we are in a way that is uniquely our own and is part of who we are.
Yes.
You know, it's like allowing that energy to flow in the world and around us and around the people that we know, allowing that spark and that star quality that we have and that spark within ourselves to shine.
The divinity is really what it is. It's our light.
Yes.
Yes.
And we give others permission. When we shine our light, we give others permission to shine their own.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we keep coming upon this theme of self-expression, right? And to have not like, you know, completely uninhibited self-expression. I mean, right? Like that can get a little hedonistic, right? And that's excess, right? So there we're into that good medicine, bad medicine paradigm, right? Where anything that's in excess or, you know, too much is going to be a negative, right? So we don't want to be like, you know, completely unbridled in every capacity, but at the same time, what you're saying about denying our basic urges and impulses, it is very deleterious to our emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. And it doesn't allow ourselves the opportunity to know ourselves or to accept ourselves or dare I say to love ourselves, which how many women do you know? I can't even count on both hands and all my toes how many women that will just say to me in casual conversation, I wish I could learn to love myself.
Yeah.
And why is that? And it's symptomatic of this idea of allowing ourselves to be subjugated and put last on that list. You know, it's so funny because Oprah, who I just love, by the way, I don't know why, something about Oprah I've always enjoyed. There's a Stanford graduation speech that she gives. She wears this white crocheted dress. It's gorgeous. I think it's from like the early 2000s, maybe this video, or maybe like the mid 2000s, like 2012. I don't know when it's from. I don't care. It doesn't matter. There's a 2-minute clip from this video. And she talks about there are no mistakes, right? Well, I've listened to this clip and shared this clip so many infinite times over the last several years. I said to myself, I got to listen to this whole entire Stanford commencement speech. What else, what other wisdom does Oprah have to drop in this particular setting, right? Well, the whole speech opens with this idea of last on the list. And there was when she was still on Oprah's show in the 90s, she had a psychiatrist on, and the psychiatrist actually opened this question out to the audience about where do you fall in the list? And nobody in the audience in 1992 was putting themselves first on the list. And the lady stood up and was like, this is the problem. This is the problem with literally everything for every one of you guys. And it's interesting.
I remember.
Oh, you remember that?
It is interesting. I remember that because I love Oprah too. And I grew up watching her actually. And
I did too.
I think Oprah was probably I think my love of Oprah is probably part of the reason why I do this now, because sometimes I feel a little bit like doing a podcast, which is amazing. I love that. But I remember her doing a show, and this show that I'm going to tell you about now actually has been popping up in my memory banks over the last couple of weeks, and it was of this woman. She had a woman on her show who wrote an article, or a New York Times article or something. She wrote a very famous article about how she loves her husband more than her children. And it was designed as an inflammatory title, and women all over the world were up in arms over this article that she wrote. And so Oprah had her on the show to explain basically and have the conversation about what she really meant. And what she was saying in this article was that she put her relationship with her husband as a priority above her relationship with her children, in the sense, and this is not saying that her children are last on the list or that she is last on the list or any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She was saying it in the context that she put her relationship first because it needed the nurturing to create the family dynamic so that she could have healthy children.
Okay.
And so she put her relationship with her, and this is what I think happens when we say we're putting ourselves first. People get up in arms about it because they're not understanding the context with which we're saying this.
Right.
She was saying it in the context of I'm caring for my children by cultivating a good relationship with my husband. That's because what she was saying.
Structure.
She made it inflammatory.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes.
I hear you. And it's interesting because as somebody who, is on this spiritual healing path, right? When Devin was 4 years old, we checked out the church down the street. We had just moved in. It was 9 years ago. And the sermon that day was all about, and they used the umbrella as the visual, but it was God, and then the husband, and then the wife, and then the children. And the boy literally turns to me at the age of 4 and he's like, "Mommy, I don't think this is the right church for us." And he wanted to leave because he didn't like how it was talking about that. But the more I've ascended, right, the more I've learned, and the more I come in to understand the world around me and the actual universal law and universal truth that pertains to life as we know it, the more I was able to recognize that is a preservation of the family system and the family structure. And I myself have lost that from the nuclear family that I created with my son's father. And I lost that in my youth because of my traumas. Yeah. Because the pain that I was carrying from so much repression and so much suppression and so much self-subjugation, and in fact, really it had become like a I don't know, degradation and effacement, abandonment, like all of it. And I wasn't
That's a huge one.
Right. And I wasn't able to preserve the structure of the family that I created. And I think about how if we had been able to tighten things up between the two of us in the advent of the baby coming, and had we been able to navigate and hold space for the grief that I had of the miscarriage when he was 15 months old, who knows what would have happened? And I look at the work that I do with families, and one of my primary goals in the work I so lovingly do is to try to preserve the family system. And how do we do that? We do that by learning how to attune to ourselves, how to regulate our own nervous system. We learn how to communicate more effectively, instilling boundaries for ourselves and for our loved ones. And from that space, now we generate relational capacity, relational competence.
That's right. That's where I was getting to.
And
You got
that's
us there, Jen. That's where I was going.
and that's where we can hold that family unit together and preserve the kids and create a new way of being and orienting to the world where each person is able to shine out and each person is able to feel that even if their partner or their mother or their father or their sister or their son disagrees with them, it's not a value judgment and it's not a dishonorance. It's a, this is where you stand and this is where I stand, and these two places are divergent, and it doesn't change the fact that I love you and I want to be in relation with you.
And that to me is complete sovereignty. That is learning the value of yourself. Learning the value of yourself and honoring the value of yourself is true sovereignty. And when we can honor ourselves as a sovereign being and as, you know, of the divine, we can be in relation with another and we can honor the relationship with another human being. And then that honoring of each other will be the food and the nourishment and the soul, you know, giving of having children and having our children in witness that relationship is loving them. That is true love to our children. Is being able to be in relation with another person while we love ourselves and have respect and have honoring of the relationship. And that's what this woman was saying. You can't have a relationship with another person unless you have that sovereignty, unless you have that love for yourself. And we're not talking selfishness here.
Right.
Like, don't get the two confused. They're very, very, very different.
Right.
Loving yourself and being a selfish person is not the same.
Well, and when I think about the strongest, most everlasting marriages and relationships, and there that brings up that little bit of grief with my father who passed on March 20th. But yeah, my parents were married for almost 60 years. I mean, they were together more than that. I think it was 57 married. They would have had 58 in August this year. He would have turned 80. And I think about their marriage and I think about how unified they were. And that was always the biggest thing that they imparted to us about communication in a marriage is you don't air things in front of the children. You go behind a closed door and whatever it takes to get yourselves on the same page, you do that. And then you bring it back to the kids. Because you got to be unified, you got to be together. And I think about all the strong couples that I know that have lasted the test of time and throughout a lifetime together of dedicated, committed, faithful, supported marriage. And that's across the board. There's not one in the mix that doesn't have that. It's like a key, core, foundational element.
Yeah, so true. And we're not talking here about the suppression of women.
Right.
That's a completely different subject. We're talking about mutual respect.
Right.
And we're talking about relationships, with each other that are an even playing field. And the women are loving and respecting themselves as the feminine.
Yes.
And the men are loving and respecting themselves as the masculine.
Yes.
And coming together like jigsaw puzzle pieces.
Yes. And he's
honoring like that.
her oracular nature. That's the other piece here. Our divine intuitive guidance that we are able to carry, and those feminine gifts. One of the feminine gifts that really kind of blows my clients away when I talk about it is our gift of gestation, our ability to endure the wait and to bring something or a
Yes.
process to fruition. I mean, when we think about when we're with child for 9 months, I mean, that's almost a year. That's a long time. And I believe that we
Yes.
are put to the test in that particular way so that we can do just what you shared at the beginning, which is trust, knowing in yourself, knowing that in your sovereignty and in your meeting your needs and in your being attuned to yourself and others, then there is kind of that sense of not I think you use the word control, like, and I don't want to like use that as like a negative, but like, yeah, you got your hands on the helm of the ship of life, right? And you
Yeah.
can then
Yeah.
steer and you can navigate the course and you can use the stars and all the other things around you and whatever, you know, tools you have at your disposal, but you're feeling your way through. You're not just using this
That's
guy.
right.
You know, this is never going to cut it. This right here, this rational mind. If this isn't speaking to this, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we
Yeah.
doing? We're walking around
It's so
dysregulated, we're walking
necessary.
around disconnected. We're
Yeah.
not here. We're not present.
Yeah. It's so necessary, I think, to recognize that part of being the feminine, like the feminine energy, because I think men have intuition too. I think they have, because we have masculine traits and they have feminine
Of
traits,
course.
and I think that both men and women have that gut feeling, and I think it's so important to acknowledge how important that, how big and part of our lives that is, because if we, there are times in life when you have to rely on that because you don't have all the information and you've never walked that path before, and so that navigation system kicks in and it becomes, informative to you. My gut is telling me this isn't right. I can't see it, I don't know why, but my gut's telling me not to go there.
Yeah, and you're
And being
absolutely
able
right.
to listen to that.
You know, I didn't mean to suggest that women are the only individuals with intuitive guidance. I mean, this is
No,
the work
not at all.
I do, you know, globally is a lot of the work I do with individuals is cultivation of that intuitive guidance. And, you know, it's interesting because Carolyn Mace will talk about the different echelons of our intuition, right? And so there's survival intuition, there's creative intuition, and then there's visionary intuition. And I think
Right.
when it comes to the visionary intuition, I guess that's what I was kind of implying with that gestational gift and in it for the long vision ahead. I do think that is something
100%.
that women are a little bit more, I guess, wired for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As the
Yeah.
pragmatic, like day-to-day getting you there things, I think is a little bit more masculine embodied. That's just in my
Yeah.
experience and in my perception of the world.
Yeah, and that makes total sense because, if you think about the male and the female roles, women are the ones that have children. We gestate with the child. We are the ones who are growing that child in that 9-month period. So we experience gestation in that way, in a deeper way, that we have to be patient. Because you don't have a choice. That's the time to make a baby. You need to, be patient for that 9 months. So I think that makes sense. And then in that period of time that we are growing a child, we as women are growing children in our wombs, then the men are free to make those practical choices and get the house ready, and we're nesting and we're going, oh, I really need this for the baby and I really need that. And then the man is the one that kind of like makes it happen. So naturally, yes, it tracks what you're saying, like in the practicalities of life.
And then you have that little merging that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Because
The puzzle pieces, exactly.
you merge it inside I merge my masculine and my feminine, he merges his masculine and his feminine, and then we come together and we merge together. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I've loved this conversation. It's been so healing.
Thank
It's been so
you.
healing to go through all of this and just discuss it with you. It's been wonderful. And we lost Juliet somewhere along the way, but I'm
Hopefully
sure
she's
that
still with us
I'm sure she'll be
watching.
watching. Yeah. So Jen, we've come to our time.
Yeah.
We've been on the live for an hour now. So thank you for coming on, and I'll be in touch with you to come back on another time. Would you come on another time with us?
Of course. How could I say no? I would love to.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Wonderful. All right. Wonderful. Thank you very much,
Thank you so much. Thank you all to watch.
See you.
See you.
Bye.